Long ago, in a faraway time, there was a poor family living quietly at the edge of a mountain in a village deep within the forest. That family had 8 children, 7 boys and 1 girl. Their parents had died early, leaving behind 8 children who hadn't yet grown up. But somehow, grief had taught them how to mature. The 7 brothers gave their hearts to protect their little sister, and the girl had long been used to sacrificing for her brothers. No one taught them to love each other, but circumstance forced them to be close. Before the sun even rose, the 7 brothers would wake up and head into the forest with bows and arrows to hunt. The sister stayed home and took care of everything: cleaning, cooking, washing, and tending the fire. No one demanded that she do all this, but she felt happy fulfilling her duties. For her, cooking a warm meal for her brothers was the greatest joy. One afternoon, while slicing vegetables for dinner, a sharp knife swept across her finger too quickly. A soft swish was heard. She looked down. The tip of her finger was bleeding. Drops of dark red blood began falling to the ground. She quickly grabbed a piece of cloth to wipe it away, but the blood wouldn't stop. She felt a flicker of fear, not from pain, but from the thought that her brothers would be upset. If they see this, they'll worry. They'll be angry at themselves for not being here to help, she thought. The fear of troubling her loved ones was greater than the pain seeping from her hand. She looked around. Everything could betray her. The blood-stained cloth, the wall, the floor. No one needed to ask. Just one glance, and everything would be revealed. In her panic, her eyes darted to the pot of soup boiling furiously. A thought flashed through her mind like lightning. If the blood dissolved into the broth, no one would ever notice. It would be as if nothing had happened. She did it, though her heart tightened. The drop of blood melted into the soup. A silent sacrifice no one would ever know. That evening, the 7 brothers returned, soaked in sweat, carrying heavy game from the forest. The scent of the cooking fire spread through the air like an embrace welcoming them back after a long day. The sister smiled, serving pieces of meat to each brother. She didn't eat. The wound on her hand still ached, but she kept it hidden, like always. That night's dinner was strange. The brothers couldn't stop praising it. They ate without saying anything except, "So delicious. Never had a dish this good before. Our sister is truly gifted." The eldest laughed aloud. "If I were king, I'd pass my throne to the sister who cooked this magical meal." The sister blushed, lowered her head, and smiled quietly. But within her were 1,000 needles pricking, not because of the truth she was hiding, but because the joy her brothers felt came from her very own blood. That night, the brothers slept soundly. But one person couldn't sleep, the youngest of the 7. He didn't know why, but something in his heart felt wrong. The soup's flavor, sweet but strange, that deep sweetness. Why did it make his heart tighten? The next morning, as everyone left the village to continue the hunt, the youngest still carried something heavy in his chest. The other 6 brothers excitedly chatted about last night's meal. They talked non-stop. "Our sister is amazing. She must have some secret recipe. We have to ask her when we get back. If we learn her recipe, we'll open a restaurant in the capital." They didn't know that deep within the forest, where sunlight barely pierced the leaves, something else was also growing inside their hearts. A thought both dark and dangerous was beginning to sprout. And from that moment on, the fate of that little girl would turn down a path she herself could never have imagined. That afternoon, the forest grew cold earlier than usual. The 6 elder brothers sat huddled beneath an ancient tree. Their makeshift lunch had long since ended, but the talk about last night's soup still hadn't stopped. "Did you feel it? That sweetness? unlike anything I've ever tasted. Same here. It wasn't from the wild herbs or the meat. There was something rich, deep, and strange. Almost like blood. That offhand remark made the group fall silent for a moment. Then one of them burst into laughter. Blood! All the better. Maybe the girl accidentally spilled some blood into it, but if just a few drops could make a dish taste so divine. At that moment, in the silence, a very dark thought, completely alien to the image of the brothers who once protected their sister, suddenly flickered to life. And very quickly, it spread from one glance to another. If just a few drops tasted that good, then what would the whole body be like? She's our own flesh and blood, but keeping her around forever is like tying up a treasure and never using it. We've raised her, protected her since childhood, and now, if she can bring forth a dish the world has never known. The sentence was never finished, but in their hearts, the 6 men already shared the same answer. One of them proposed, "Let's build a hut in the forest. Tell her we're taking her to see her future husband's home." Right. Once she stands in the center, we'll use our bows and finish it in one strike. Then we'll divide the parts, like we always do with the game we hunt. Everything was discussed as if they were talking about an animal. None of the 6 saw anything wrong. What they now envisioned was no longer the little sister who had once patched their clothes or served rice into each of their bowls. Now, in their eyes, she was merely the most delicious thing they had ever tasted. Only one among them still wore a pensive face from the start. The youngest brother. He remained silent, neither agreeing nor objecting, but inside him, a storm was raging. How could they even think that? She's our sister. Could it be that dish made them lose their minds? That night they returned home as if nothing had happened. The little sister still waited at the doorway, her eyes warm, her smile simple. As usual, she set the table, poured water, and invited each brother to eat. None of the 6 dared look her in the eye. They avoided her gaze like men already burdened with an unspeakable crime. Only the youngest silently observed everything. He felt as if he were trapped in a terrible dream. But even he couldn't stand up and object, because he was too young, too alone among 6 strong brothers. Then the next morning, just as planned, the eldest brother walked into his sister's room, wearing a cheerful expression. "Sweet sister, you've grown up. I found a wonderful husband for you. Today we're all taking you to see his home." The girl was both confused and joyful. For all these years living with her brothers, she'd grown used to sacrificing, never once thinking of marriage. Now, hearing someone loved her, her heart stirred with feelings both unfamiliar and dreamy. She washed her face, changed into her finest clothes, and tucked a forest flower freshly picked that morning into her hair. They set off. The girl walked in the center, her brothers surrounding her. The forest path was rough, leaves rustling overhead, but her heart was full of excitement. She trusted her brothers, the ones she had loved and depended on her whole life. After a while, her legs grew tired, and she asked softly, "Big brother, is it still far?" The eldest smiled gently and pointed ahead. "There, on top of that hill, see it? That little hut is your husband's home." She looked where he pointed. On a high mound, in the middle of the forest, stood a small hut made of bamboo branches and forest leaves. She nodded. "Simple but charming. I like it." She didn't know that it was the end of her fate, not the beginning of a new life. They arrived. The eldest brother gave a command. "Tie her to the center pole to begin the ancestral ceremony." The girl looked surprised. "What ceremony is this, brother?" "It's a tradition in your husband's village. Just follow along, don't be afraid." The 6 brothers rushed forward, tying her hands and feet to the bamboo pole in the middle of the hut. She struggled. "What are you doing? What is this?" But no one answered. She turned her head, searching for the eyes of the youngest brother. But he lowered his face, unable to meet her pleading gaze. Tears began to fall, not out of fear, but because her heart had shattered. "I lived my whole life for them, loved them like a mother and father, and now—" She didn't know. When greed blinds the human heart, it can be more merciless than any beast in the wild. The sky above the hilltop began to turn gray. Wind howled through the leaves like the ancient forest sighing, bearing witness to a sin about to be committed by the very ones who once vowed to protect their little sister. The young girl was tightly bound to a bamboo post in the center of the hut. Her pale skin was smeared with forest dust, her hair loose and tangled in the wind. Her once innocent eyes now filled with fear and pain. Not because death was near, but because the people she loved most in this life were standing in a row, each holding an arrow. The eldest brother stepped forward, bow in hand, his gaze resolute, like a hunter aiming at prey. The girl choked back tears but did not scream. She did not scold, did not blame, only pressed her palms together and, with a trembling but gentle voice, said, "If you truly wish to end my life, please shoot me in the chest. Don't let me suffer long." Then she began to sing, in the softest voice, "Shoot me, brother, shoot straight to this chest. Let not your arrow be lost in the forest wind. I beg you, let it hurt just once." The eldest brother flinched. His hand trembled. His eyes hesitated. But then, as if possessed by some evil spirit, he tightened the bowstring and fired. The arrow cut through the wind, but missed. It struck the bamboo post behind her. The second brother stepped forward. His hands also shook, but his hunger overpowered his fear. The girl looked up again. "If it's you, please also aim for my chest." Then she sang once more, her voice lighter than the breeze. "Shoot me, brother. Don't look too long. Don't let these eyes soften your aim. I understand now that love ends here." The second arrow flew, and missed too. Then came the third brother, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. One by one they stepped forward, and one by one they all heard her sing. And each arrow failed to strike her, not because they felt compassion, but because it was as if some invisible force blocked them. The forest seemed to choke, the wind rose, and those clear eyes seemed to see through each of their souls. At that moment, only the youngest brother remained. The 6 elder brothers surrounded him, commanding, "It's your turn. If you don't shoot, we'll kill you too." He trembled, his hands unsteady, his eyes brimming with tears. In his heart were 1,000 wounds. But the sister smiled at him, her pale lips uttering one final, tender plea. "I know you're not like them, but if you don't shoot, you'll die. So let me save you one last time." Then the girl sang, slowly, each verse soaked with the final love still left in this world. "Shoot me, brother, this one last time, so you may live, and I may turn to ash. Though in this life we share no blood, in my heart you were always home." The youngest brother broke down in tears. His hand clenched the bow in agony. The final arrow was released. It soared through the air, slower than any arrow before, as if it did not want to fall. But then, it struck the girl's forehead. A dry thud echoed. She collapsed. Blood streamed down, bright red, soaking into the forest soil. No one said a word. The 6 brothers stood frozen. The forest wind seemed to stop. Only the youngest brother fell to the ground, covering his face and weeping like a child abandoned in a nightmare. But he was the last one she trusted. She chose to die by his hand, so he could live. A price too great for such a pure love. Night fell. The 6 brothers began butchering their sister. Each slice, each cut, no longer pain, only the hunger overtaking reason. They tore flesh, cooked, and tasted, as if enjoying the most precious delicacy of their lives. The youngest did not touch any of it. He took a small fish and a few forest crabs, quietly cooking them alone. He hid his sister's flesh in a small hole he had dug beforehand, buried it deep along with tearful prayers. "Sister, I couldn't save you, but I will keep your soul intact, untainted by blood." While the 6 brothers feasted greedily, the youngest sat nearby, quietly eating fish and cold rice. His tears fell onto each grain. He didn't know that this small act would become the red thread guiding a miracle yet to come. From the small hole in the earth where the youngest brother had buried the flesh and bones of his beloved sister, a bamboo shoot began to rise. Just a small one, slender. But within a few days, it grew taller than a man, vibrant green amidst the forest, as if it were absorbing all the injustice buried there. Then came a clump, then a grove. Soon, a dense bamboo forest stood there, green like the youngest brother's heart, straight like the silent vow he carried from that day. The youngest brother continued to live quietly at the edge of the village. No one asked, no one remembered. The 6 elder brothers, on the other hand, thrived. They grew wealthier, hunted more game, and earned the villagers' respect. But only they knew the truth. The meat they had eaten that day wasn't from wild animals. At night, in restless dreams, their sister's song still echoed faintly. "Shoot me once, let it all be done. I do not blame, only ache deep in my heart." One day, when the bamboo grove had just turned 7 years old, an old wandering monk passed through the area. He stopped at the bamboo grove, seeking a place for a few days of meditation. But as soon as he sat down, something strange happened. From deep within the dense bamboo came a strange wind, carrying a scent, earthy, metallic, and sorrowful. And while meditating, the monk heard a mysterious voice echo inside his mind. "Master, this smell does not come from soil, but from unjust blood. Beneath these bamboos lies a soul buried in betrayal. Please help me speak once more." The monk opened his eyes. His heart trembled. He stood, stepped into the grove, chose the straightest stalk, and carved it with his own hands into a bamboo flute. When the flute was finished, he carried it down to the village. Wherever he went, he played a melody. The flute's sound was not mere music, but a whispering tale carried by each note. And strangely, whenever the flute sounded near the home of one of the 6 brothers, it began to sing, "It was not an enemy who killed me, but the one who once wiped away my tears. It was not a stranger who betrayed me, but kin who traded me for a delicious meal." The 6 brothers panicked. That night, they could not sleep. The next morning, the monk came to each of their homes, playing the flute like a silent accusation. Wherever he played, the flute unveiled. "My flesh and blood now rest inside the belly of the one who once called himself brother. The lullabies of old are now shattered in the cracking of bones." The 6 brothers were terrified, unable to meet the monk's gaze. They threw money, rice, begged him to leave, but the flute's song clung to them like a vengeful spirit demanding justice. Finally, the monk reached the small house at the edge of the village, where the youngest brother lived alone in poverty. The moment he stepped inside, the flute's sound changed. It rang pure, piercing, like the first tear after years of drought. "This is the home of the one who kept my soul. He did not eat, he did not harm. He dug the hole, buried me with prayers. This is me, it's me, your sister, I'm here." The youngest brother collapsed, weeping. The monk placed the flute on the table, pressed his palms together and said, Do you wish to see your sister again?" The boy nodded, trembling. The monk said, "Keep this flute at your bedside. Each night, light an oil lamp and recite 3 prayers of gratitude. When your heart is pure enough, your sister will return." That night, the youngest did exactly as instructed. He placed the flute under the glow of the oil lamp, bowed his head with each prayer. Then he sat in silence. At midnight, the lamp's light shimmered strangely. From the flute, a thin mist emerged, slowly forming the shape of his sister. Frail, hair flowing, eyes bright like the full moon. She stepped out, smiling. The youngest brother was frozen. He dared not breathe, fearing it was an illusion. But when the girl reached out to wipe his tear, he knew. It was real. Then she spoke, her voice like a breeze. "Thank you for not eating me. Thank you for keeping a place for me in your heart." He burst into tears. They embraced, needing no more words. The next morning, villagers whispered that in the poorest house, 2 people now lived, a young man and a young woman, like twin siblings, happy together. No one knew where the girl had come from, but all agreed. She carried a strange light, the light of someone who had died and returned, not with hatred, but only love. The story ends there. The 6 brothers were later shunned by the villagers. They left the village for distant lands, carrying with them the darkness of their own hearts. The youngest and his sister lived together forever. No marriage, no title, just 2 souls caring for one another like children who had once lost everything and now had only each other. Since then, the bamboo forest remains green. The wind through it still plays the sound of a flute somewhere, not a flute of vengeance but of love, of a soul that chose forgiveness and a heart that stayed clean in a world so stained. Final lesson. The one who kills you may not be the worst, but the one you once loved most, who betrayed you, might be. Yet forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means rising above hatred, so that you may be free.